It was 2:14 p.m. when the notification came through. A soft chime from her phone, nothing out of the ordinary. Claire was at her desk at the small insurance office where she worked, halfway through a spreadsheet that felt like it had been multiplying behind her back. She almost didn't look at the screen, but the icon was unmistakable, her home security app. The kind of alert that usually meant a package had been dropped off or the wind had blown the neighbor's cat across her porch camera's view. She tapped it without thinking. The feed from her bedroom camera loaded slowly, that faint gray buffer circle turning and turning, and then the picture snapped into focus. Someone was in her bed, not lying on top of the blanket like a tired friend who had wandered in for a nap, not moving around or tidying the covers. No, this figure was beneath her duvet, the shape of a head on the pillow, the rise and fall of slow, steady breathing. Her first reaction was confusion, a kind of stubborn disbelief. She lived alone. She had lived alone for 5 years, ever since her last relationship ended, and she decided she preferred the stillness of a quiet apartment to the unpredictable noise of someone else's habits. There was no one who should be there. She blinked, leaned closer to her phone. The bedroom was dim. She always kept the curtains partly drawn to keep the afternoon sun off her bookshelves. The image quality was crisp enough to see the faint movement of the blanket with each breath. Whoever it was, they weren't moving otherwise. The timestamp said the feed was live. Claire's stomach tightened. She set her phone down on the desk, trying to keep her hands from shaking. It's a glitch. That was her first real thought. It had to be a glitch. Maybe the last feed had frozen, and what she was looking at was an old image from the morning. She did sometimes toss clothes on the bed. Maybe they'd bunched up into something vaguely person-shaped. She reopened the app. The buffering wheel spun again, and the scene resolved, the same shape under the covers. Only this time, the head shifted slightly on the pillow. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The office around her faded, the drone of her coworker's phone call, the tap of someone's keyboard. She was already reaching for her bag, mind whirring through possibilities. Call the police, call her landlord, call... Who? Her thumb hovered over the emergency call button on the app. She imagined explaining it. Yes, I'm at work, but my camera shows someone in my bed right now. It sounded absurd, but the footage was right there. Before she could tap, the figure on the bed sat up. Not fast, not startled. Just upright, as if they'd heard something. Claire could see more now. Long dark hair falling forward, the shadowy shape of a face she couldn't quite make out. They didn't look at the camera. They looked toward her bedroom door. A cold ripple went through her. The camera had no audio, but she imagined the faint creak of the floorboards she knew so well. Then, as if in answer to a question she couldn't hear, the figure slid off the bed and walked out of frame. Claire's hand was shaking now as she pressed the app's record button. The hallway camera should pick them up next. It was angled to catch the front door and the kitchen. But when the feed switched, the hallway was empty. No sound, no motion. She clicked back to the bedroom camera. The bed was empty. Her heart was pounding so loudly she could feel it in her ears. It could still be a glitch. Some software hiccup splicing old and new footage together. She needed to know. Claire stood, muttered something about taking an early break, and grabbed her coat. Outside, the air felt too sharp, the sunlight too bright. She got into her car and started driving, trying not to think about the fact that she had no plan for what she'd do if someone was inside when she got there. Her apartment building was only 15 minutes away, but every stoplight felt like a deliberate test of her patience. When she finally pulled into the lot, the building looked exactly the same. No suspicious cars, no movement in her windows. She sat in the car for a moment, staring up at her second-floor unit, half expecting to see a face at the curtain. Nothing. She forced herself to get out, locking the car behind her. The stairwell smelled faintly of old paint and laundry detergent. At her door, she held the key for a moment, listening. Silence. She opened it slowly. The living room was just as she'd left it that morning. Coffee mug in the sink, blanket folded on the couch. The afternoon light slanted in, calm and golden, like it belonged to a different reality entirely. She checked the kitchen. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. Finally, she reached her bedroom. The bed was made. Perfectly made. Claire never made her bed in the morning. She stared at it, her skin prickling. The pillow was positioned neatly in the center. The blanket smoothed down with no wrinkles, no sign that anyone had been there at all. She took a cautious step inside, scanning the room. Her books were aligned on the shelves, the curtains drawn just as she'd left them. But the air felt wrong, faintly cooler, as if the window had been opened earlier and shut again. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone still in her hand, and pulled up the footage again. The recording was there. The figure in the bed, sitting up, walking out of frame. It all played back exactly as she remembered. Only now, when the figure turned their head before getting up, Claire thought she could see the faintest glint in their eyes. Like they'd been looking directly into the camera after all. Claire replayed the footage 3 times before forcing herself to lock the phone and slip it into her pocket. She could sit here all day staring at that pixelated figure, wondering if it was a trick of the light, a hacked camera, or something else entirely. But she needed to do something. She checked the locks. Deadbolt secure. Chain in place. Window latches all fastened. Still, she couldn't shake the faint, charged feeling in the air, like the room was holding its breath. Her plan was simple. Gather what she needed for the rest of the day, lock the place up tight, and go back to work. Pretend she hadn't seen anything until she could think straight. She shoved her laptop into her bag, grabbed her keys, and turned toward the door. That's when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, close enough that she felt them through the floorboards. She froze. The sound wasn't from the front door. It was from inside, from the wall that separated her apartment from the vacant unit next door. The building manager had told her months ago that the place was being renovated, that it had been empty for over a year. No one was supposed to be in there. Claire set her bag down quietly and stepped closer to the wall. The knocks didn't repeat. She held her breath, waiting, ears straining for the smallest hint of movement. Nothing. Maybe the sound had carried from outside, or from the hallway. Old buildings did that, let noises wander. She took 1 step toward the door, and another knock came. This time softer, but distinctly from inside the wall at chest height. Her phone was already in her hand. She opened the camera feed for the hallway. Still empty. Slowly, she reached for the door handle. The deadbolt was still locked. The chain still in place. She peered through the peephole. The hallway stretched in both directions, still and silent. She almost laughed. Maybe it was a pipe, or a bird trapped in the wall. Something explainable. Then her phone buzzed again. Another motion alert. Bedroom camera. The feed loaded instantly this time. No buffering. Her bed was still neatly made, but the curtains had shifted. 1 corner hung loose, as if someone had brushed past it. She stared at the image until her vision began to blur. When she finally blinked, there was movement in the lower corner of the frame. A shadow. The kind that should only appear when someone walks between the bed and the camera. Her finger hovered over the 911 call button, but she hesitated. What if it was all a tech issue? What if she ended up explaining to the police that her haunted Wi-Fi was giving her bad dreams in the middle of the afternoon? Another knock came from the wall. She turned her head toward it slowly, the way you would if you knew something was looking back. The knock for a lighter now, almost tentative. 3, then 4, then a pause, and 1 final tap. Claire backed toward the door, heart pounding in her throat. She unhooked the chain and unlocked the deadbolt in 1 smooth motion. The moment she stepped into the hallway, the air felt different, stale, cool, and faintly metallic. She locked her door behind her and went straight for the vacant unit. The door had an inspection sticker across it, dated 3 months ago. The lock was a simple key-in knob, and from the look of it, no one had touched it in a long time. She pressed her ear to the wood. Nothing. For a long moment, she just stood there, listening to the emptiness. And then she heard it. Not a knock this time, but a slow, dragging sound like something heavy being pulled across the floor. She stepped back, every instinct telling her not to be here. As she turned toward the stairwell, her phone buzzed again. Another motion alert. This one wasn't from the bedroom. It was from the living room camera. The feed loaded to show her apartment exactly as she'd left it, except for 1 detail. The blanket she'd folded neatly on the couch was now draped over the armrest, as if someone had just stood up from sitting there. Her breath quickened. She'd locked the door. She'd locked the windows. Whoever or whatever, had moved that blanket hadn't used the front entrance. Claire didn't go back inside. Not yet. Instead, she went downstairs to the building office. The manager, a wiry man in his 60s named Frank, was at his desk, flipping through invoices. She asked him directly if anyone had been in the unit next to hers. "Nope," he said without looking up. "Place is sealed up until the contractors come back next month." "What about the one above mine?" she pressed. He shook his head. "Empty." "Why?" She debated telling him everything, but the words felt too strange to say out loud. Instead, she muttered something about hearing noises and asked if the walls were thin. "Thin enough," he said. "But no one's up there next door, I promise you that. Just you on that side of the hall." She thanked him and left, feeling his eyes on her until she turned the corner. Back at her door, she paused with the key in her hand. Her phone buzzed again. Another alert. This time it was the bedroom feed, but there was no figure in bed, no shifting curtain. Just the faint, unmistakable sound of breathing. The camera had no audio. Claire stared at the phone screen until her eyes stung. She could hear it, slow, measured inhalations followed by the faintest exhale. Not loud enough to be distorted, not faint enough to be dismissed. But her home security cameras didn't have microphones. She closed the feed and opened it again, thinking maybe another app was running in the background. No change. The sound was still there, steady and close, like someone was standing right in front of the lens. She tapped the phone against her thigh, hard, as if that could knock loose whatever glitch was making her imagination play tricks. The sound continued. Then, without warning, the breathing stopped. The silence in her earphones was almost worse. She waited, leaning slightly forward as if she could catch the faintest trace of movement in the frame. The blanket on the bed shifted. Not much, just enough for a small crease to appear where there hadn't been one before. Claire's grip tightened on her phone. The door to her bedroom was in the background of the feed, visible just over the corner of the bed. She could have sworn it had been slightly ajar before. Now it was shut. Her first thought was I left it open. Her second was someone closed it. She turned toward her own apartment door. She could go in now, rip through every room, prove to herself there was nothing to find. But the image of that door, closing on its own, rooted her in place. She switched to the hallway feed. Nothing. Switched to the living room. The blanket on the couch, still draped over the armrest, exactly as she'd seen it before. Her phone vibrated in her hand. Not a security alert this time, but a text. Unknown number. It was a single word, don't. Claire's breath caught. She stared at the message, her mind leaping in a dozen directions. Scam, wrong number, prank. But something about the timing made her skin crawl. She typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. The message sat there on the screen, silent and heavy, as if it was waiting for her to ignore it. She looked back at the bedroom feed. The door in the background was open again. Her knees felt weak. It was broad daylight. She was in a locked building with neighbors and an office downstairs. There was no reason to be afraid. And yet, every part of her was telling her to leave. Not just the hallway, not just the building, but the entire city. Instead, she took a slow breath and unlocked her door. The familiar scent of her apartment, faint coffee, laundry soap, and the slightest trace of the vanilla candle she'd burned last night, met her like an old friend trying to pretend nothing was wrong. The living room looked the same. Kitchen, too. But the moment she stepped toward the bedroom, the air felt different. Denser. The way it did before a thunderstorm, when you could feel the weight of the atmosphere pressing against your skin. She reached for the doorframe. The door was wide open, exactly as it had been in the feed. The bed, still perfectly made. She crossed the room and touched the blanket. It was cold. The curtains fluttered slightly. She moved to check the window latch, still locked. But the glass felt cool to the touch, like it had been open moments ago. From the corner of her eye, she thought she saw movement in the hallway behind her. She turned quickly. Nothing. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. Too late. Her chest tightened. She typed back. Too late for what? This time, the reply came almost instantly. Look. She didn't want to. Every muscle in her body resisted, but she forced herself to glance at the bedroom camera feed. It was showing the back of her own head. She was looking at herself, live, from an angle the camera had never been able to capture before, slightly behind and to the right, as if someone was holding it in their hand. Claire's mind spun through every explanation, none of them good. The camera was fixed to the wall. It couldn't move. And yet, the feed she was looking at showed an angle from behind her own head, the nape of her neck pale against the darker blur of the hallway beyond. Her hands were trembling. She turned slowly, glancing over her shoulder as if she might catch someone holding a second camera. But the space behind her was empty. In the feed, her on-screen self remained frozen for a beat too long, a half-second delay she had never seen before. Then it smiled. Claire's stomach twisted. She wasn't smiling. The image on the phone blinked once, slow and deliberate, and the feed cut to black. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark screen. She pressed the phone's power button, tapped through the menus, reopened the app. All the feeds were gone. Every camera offline. A faint knock came from somewhere in the apartment. Not the door this time, but from inside the bedroom. Her first instinct was to run. But if she left without proof, without something tangible to show someone, it would just become another story she could barely convince herself of later. She tightened her grip on the phone and stepped toward the bedroom door. The air grew cooler with each step, the kind of cool that didn't come from drafts or bad insulation. It felt deliberate, directed. She pushed the door open slowly. The bed was still made, the curtains still drawn, but the shadows in the corners felt darker, like they had weight. Her eyes caught on something new, a small, folded piece of paper resting dead center on the pillow. She hadn't seen it before. Every part of her screamed not to touch it, but she forced herself forward, leaned over, and picked it up. The paper was cool, almost damp. She unfolded it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, looping, elegant, oddly old-fashioned. "Stop watching yourself." Her chest tightened. She looked back at the doorway, half expecting to see someone standing there. Empty. The paper slipped from her fingers. It landed silently on the blanket. Then, without warning, the phone in her hand buzzed violently. The security app had come back online by itself. The bedroom feed was live again. She was standing exactly where she was now, holding the phone, staring at the bed. But in the feed, she wasn't alone. A figure stood behind her, tall, with hair hanging forward to obscure the face, shoulders slightly hunched as if leaning close. Claire spun around. The room was empty. When she looked back at the phone, the figure was closer in the feed, so close it filled most of the frame, a dark blur at the edge of her own shoulder. And then she felt it, the faintest warmth of breath against the back of her neck. The night stretched on without form. Claire didn't remember lying down, but at some point she found herself sitting upright on the couch, phone in her lap, the glow of the screen making her feel pale and unsteady. She hadn't turned the cameras off. She couldn't. Every time she thought about closing the app, she felt that same low thrum of dread at the base of her skull. The feed stayed open, each window neatly tiled so she could watch all angles at once. At 3:17 a.m., the breathing started again. It came from the bedroom feed, just like before, steady, slow, close. She leaned forward, trying to convince herself it was interference from another device. Then the breathing shifted, became uneven. A low, rasping whisper threaded through it. The words were soft enough that she had to hold the phone to her ear to catch them. "I see you." Her stomach dropped. It wasn't the canned, metallic distortion of a phone call or an intercom. This was human, present. The tone was neither mocking nor threatening, just matter of fact. She switched to the hallway feed, but it was empty. Living room, empty. Kitchen, empty. Bedroom, the bed was no longer made. The blanket was crumpled at the foot, pillows shoved to one side, as if someone had just gotten up in a hurry. The whisper came again, louder this time, filling her head even though no audio channel should exist. Still here, Claire's eyes darted between feeds. Every camera angle remained stubbornly still. Then, in the upper left corner of the bedroom view, a shadow stretched across the floor, long, narrow, and bending at an unnatural angle. She pushed herself off the couch, heart pounding, and back toward the front door. Before she reached it, the hallway camera flickered, just for half a second. But when it came back, she was no longer looking at the empty corridor outside her door. She was looking at the inside of her apartment, her own living room, from a high corner she didn't recognize. And in the middle of the frame was Claire herself, standing with the phone in her hand, staring at the feed. She froze. Her on-screen double was breathing slowly, just like the figure in bed. The rise and fall of her shoulders didn't match her own. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Another text from the same number. Stop watching. She typed back, "Who are you?" No reply. Her double on the feed tilted its head slightly, as if listening to something behind her. She turned. Nothing but the closed apartment door. When she looked back at the phone, the feed had changed again. Now it showed her bedroom, empty except for one detail. The figure was back in bed. Only this time, it wasn't lying still. It was facing the camera, and it was smiling. The figure's smile didn't move. It was fixed, almost painted on, the kind of expression that seemed more like an imitation of human emotion than the real thing. Claire's throat felt tight. She wanted to look away from the phone, but something about that image held her. Then the camera feed jerked sideways, as if it had been knocked out of place, and the screen went black. Her heart hammered. She lowered the phone just enough to see the real bedroom in front of her, still empty, still lit by the faint orange glow of the street lamp outside. The phone buzzed once in her hand. A new notification. Motion detected. Living room camera. She opened it instantly. The feed showed her couch, the coffee table, the folded blanket neatly in place, exactly how it had been when she'd left for work the previous day. And then, movement. From the left edge of the frame, a figure stepped into view. Not the one from the bedroom. Not even quite a person. The shape was wrong, limbs a little too long, head tilting in slow, deliberate increments. It stopped in the center of the room and looked straight into the lens. No face. Just darkness where features should be. The screen flickered once, twice, then the figure was gone. Claire est errant. She checked the hallway feed. The hallway was empty. She backed toward the front door, phone clutched so tightly her fingers hurt. She could leave now. Drive until she found somewhere that didn't feel like it was folding in on itself. But as her hand touched the lock, the phone buzzed again. This time, there was no motion alert. Just a text from the unknown number. Almost done. Her stomach knotted. She typed, "What do you want?" The reply came immediately. To finish watching, she switched to the bedroom feed again and froze. The camera was angled toward the bed, and lying there under the covers was her. Eyes closed, breathing slow and steady, exactly as she'd seen the first time she'd gotten the alert at work. She watched her on-screen self shift slightly, roll toward the camera. The eyes opened. They were looking directly at her. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. The screen cracked, and the feed cut to black for the final time. In the silence that followed, Claire thought she could hear it again, that slow, steady breathing. Only now, it wasn't coming from the phone. It was coming from the other side of the bedroom door,